Hi, I'm John Cranton with Vegas Sports Masters. Going to take a look at the 2017 Big 12 college football season. First, want to remind you that Jim Feist is off a 72-48 NFL campaign. You can get aboard this summer with Jim's Early Bird Special. What you'll get is the entire 4 weeks of NFL preseason, including his preseason game of the year, all that for $29 just by calling Jim's offices. Just call 888-777-4155. All right, let's start with the Big 12 conference preview for 2017. You know, they actually had a very good bowl run. The Big 12 did of 4-2, despite being an underdog in 5 of 6 contests. Oklahoma routed a terrific team in the Sugar Bowl, and then Oklahoma State battered the Pac-12 South champion in the Alamo Bowl. So it was a very good postseason run. With that said, we haven't seen a Big 12 team in the national championship game for quite some time, over 7 years. 2 years ago, Oklahoma got to the Big Four, but got smoked by 20 points to Clemson, 37-17. So with that said, we have to have some teams that could be in the running here for the national champion. Vegas odds has Oklahoma at 10-1 to win the title. Second place, Oklahoma State, 55-1, but they're certainly a loaded team for Mike Gundy. Let's start, though, with Oklahoma, who rolled through the Big 12 undefeated, 9-0 last year, 11-2 straight up, 7-6 against the spread. That is part of a 16-10 spread run for new coach Lincoln Riley. So on a 15-11 run under the total. And Stoops' team is really loaded for 2017. He's got his quarterback back in the senior Baker Mayfield, 40 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, over 3,900 yards passing. It's the second year for offensive coordinator Lincoln Riley. He came over from East Carolina where they had wide open offenses, and he's done wonders here with the Sooners. You got 7 starters back on offense, 7 on defense, and you got the entire offensive line coming back for the Sooners, one of the best offensive lines in the country. Do have some new running backs and wide receivers. In the backfield, you'll see Rodney Anderson, a running back, along with Abdul Adams. He saw some time last year, 283 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. And the wide receiver core is going to have kind of a new look. They're going to take a look at a couple of transfers, though. Senior wide receiver Marquise Brown and Jeff Badette come in. They should step in right away. Badette comes over from Kentucky, where he led the SEC with 21 yards per catch. In addition, you get returning 6'5" senior wide receiver Jeff Mead. He had 150 yards. Could be a big plus, though, with his height. Plus, you got Mark Andrews, who had 489 yards last year, along with Nick Basquine, who had 265 yards. Now, the defense for the Sooners doesn't have to be great when you get that kind of offensive production, and they were good enough, 29.7 points per game. Defense coordinator Mike Stoops is going to move from a 3-4 base back to a 4-3 base for this season. Wants to generate more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. He's got some good defensive ends to work with, and senior Matt Romar and sophomore Neville Gallimore. He's going to be playing on the interior. The Sooners generally play 5 defensive backs in coverage most of the time. They got the cornerback position very solid with Stephen Parker. At times, they struggled in the secondary, giving up big plays before they got the situation with the safety in Parker solidified, because they had a couple of bad games early in the year. That was a 45-24 loss to Ohio State, and then that game against Houston early last year in September, a 33-22 loss. But once they got things stabilized, they were actually very good. So this team is really loaded to have a 10-12 win season again. You look at the schedule. The big one is week 2 at Ohio State in September. It's a revenge game. And then road games for the Sooners at Baylor, at Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Keep in mind, the Sooners at home the last 11 years, 63-11 straight up, 36-30 against the spread. And with that high-flying offense, they're on a 35-27-1 run over the total. Wouldn't be surprised to see that continue. All right, let's take a look at one of their biggest threats here, also in the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Mike Gundy's team off a 10-3 campaign, 8-5 against the spread. They've had back-to-back 10-3 seasons. Very strong 7-12 in the Big 12, and you got a returning offense of 7 players, 5 on defense. They've had 10 wins now in 5 of the last 7 seasons, and 2017 looks great because senior quarterback Mason Rudolph returns, 28 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, over 4,000 yards passing. He is 16-1 odds in the Heisman Trophy running. And you got the passing game that is ranked number 7th and 9th in the nation the last 2 years. Last year, they averaged 324 yards passing. That was 9th. Good balance, 170.8 yards rushing. And the offense was 17th in scoring at 38.6 points per game. Now, the offensive line for the Cowboys, that'll be a bit of a question mark. They were inconsistent at times last year, and they'll be working on their 4th offensive line coach in the last 5 years. Good news, though, is the backfield with Justin Hill, a sophomore running back, returning 1,142 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. And you got Jeff Carr, a junior, to help out. It's also one of the best wide receiving core in the nation. Senior wide receiver James Washington returns 1,380 yards, receiving 19.4 yards per catch. And he's not alone. Junior Jalen McCleskey is back, 812 yards. Chris Lacey had 489 yards. They got Marcel Aitman, who had 760 yards receiving 2 years ago, but he had a foot injury last season, plus throwing an LSU transfer in Tyron Johnson. This is going to be one of the best passing offenses in the country again. Now, the defense for Oklahoma State gave up 28 points per game. That was 65th in the country. The rush defense was a major concern, 204 yards rushing per game, and they lose 4 of their top 7 tacklers. You do have a pretty good linebacker core with Chad Whitner. He was a second all Big 12 pick last season. They do lose their top tackler at safety, so the secondary has some concerns. I look at the schedule for the Cowboys. Week 3 is a big one at Pittsburgh. They got road games at Texas, West Virginia, and Iowa State. They do get Baylor and Oklahoma at home, so they could sneak in there as Big 12 champs. And that's a revenge game, though. Actually, 2 straight years they've lost to the Sooners 38-20. Last year was a 12-point underdog. That game sailed way under the total of 74.5. And then 2 years ago, they lost at home to the Sooners 58-23. But all in all, at least 10 wins is likely for the 3rd straight year for this team. Let's take a look at the West Virginia Mountaineers. You know, a year ago in our previews, we had West Virginia winning about 8 or 9 games. And even some of you in West Virginia left us some YouTube messages saying, boy, we're not that high on West Virginia. Wonder why you guys are so optimistic. Well, they had kind of a breakout season for Dana Holgorsen. 10 wins, 3 losses. Didn't cover numbers, 5-7-1 against the spread. That's part of a 10-15-1 spread run. But overall, it was a terrific season for the Mountaineers. Also on a 25-14 run under the total. This season, you got 6 starters back on offense, but only 3 on defense. The offense was very good, over 31 points per game last year. 257 yards passing. That ranked 42nd in the nation for the 2nd year in a row. That's because the ground attack was very good, 228.4 yards rushing per game. That was 24th in the country. So you got a passing attack that is ranked 10th, 34th, 9th, and then 42nd each of the last 2 years. It's been pretty consistent. Offensive coordinator Jake Spavital is back to Morgantown. He spent 1 year with the Cal Bears and their pass-happy offense. Before that, he spent 2 years at Texas A&M as offensive coordinator with wide opens attack. So he's going to be back. He'll be calling the plays. West Virginia has a new quarterback, but they do pick up Will Greer. This guy's a junior who was at the University of Florida and did very well with the Gators. 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions before an injury, but he transfers here. And it should be a balanced offense because Justin Crawford, a senior running back, returns. He was the Big 12's offensive newcomer of the year, just over 1,000 yards rushing, but a whopping 7.7 yards per carry. He's got sophomore running back Kennedy McCoy to help out, 472 yards, 6.5 yards per carry. Backfield looks very good, although the offensive line does lose 3 star players. They do return Colton McKivitz, who is a sophomore, and they welcome a top junior college signee, JUCO signee, in Kelby Wicklund. He's an offensive guard, so they do lose some key players, but they do have some interesting talent return. So it should be a very potent and balanced offense once again. And the wide receiver is very deep. Kyron White returns 583 yards. He's back from a broken leg, and he missed the final 2 games because of it, but a very productive player, as well as wide receiver David Sills. He was 1 season as a junior college quarterback at Cal, and he's going to be stepping in. And then they got Gary Jennings, who saw some time last year, but it's still a pretty balanced offense overall. Now, the defense for the Mountaineers was very good last year, 23.4 points per game allowed. They have a unique 3-3-5 defensive scheme. That means putting pressure on the quarterbacks is not easy to do. They have some new looks on the defensive line. Adam Schuler's going to step in. He's a sophomore, saw a little bit of time last season. The secondary has Drayvon Askew Henry. He missed all of last year with an injury, but when he was playing 2 years ago, he was a solid player. They got Corey Winfield. He's a graduate transfer. He was a 2-year starter at the University of Syracuse. He figures to be a key asset thrown into the Mountaineers' defensive backfield. Now the schedule for West Virginia, much tougher this year. They're going to open against Virginia Tech. That's a Sunday, September 3rd game. You get some road games at Kansas, TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, and Oklahoma are going to be largely difficult. And there's 2 revenge games on the schedule. One is going to be Oklahoma State. A year ago, the Mountaineers were a perfect 6-0 to start the year. And then Oklahoma State crushed them 37-20, and they didn't match up well at all with the Oklahoma Sooners, losing 56-28. 8 wins is more likely than what they did last year with 10, but this team is capable of going bowling once again. And if you like to play totals, keep in mind West Virginia 46-31 run over the total the last 6 years. All right, let's take a look at the rebuilding Baylor Bears. They have a new coach for this year, and they're off a 7-6 season. Not bad, although expectations were much higher. The thing is, the Bears started 5-0 last year, and then everything just fell apart with all kinds of problems. The new coach will be Matt Rule. He comes over from Temple. He has an inexperienced team here to work with. It was a pretty good offense, number 35th in the nation with 34.6 points per game, 281 yards passing with 24th in the nation. And the running game was outstanding, number 14th in the country with 241.8 yards per game. However, Rule is a very different type of offensive mind. He likes the physical, punishing game in the trenches, likes ball control on offense, so don't look for an explosive Baylor team that we've been used to the last couple of years. In fact, Baylor hasn't used a playbook for the last 10 years, but they have one for the first time in a decade for this season. You also have new offensive coordinators here in Glenn Thomas and Jeff Nixon. They're going to share time, and they have NFL head coaching experience. Now, the quarterback situation, Zach Smith stepped in as a freshman last year. He'll be a sophomore coming back this year. 13 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year. And they also have Anu Solomon. He's a transfer from Arizona, and he will be able to play, but had a lot of injuries and certainly a mobile guy, but he's there as a starter or a backup for them. The Bears have a veteran offensive line, which is going to help the ground game, led by guard Blake Blackmore and Pat Lawrence, the tackle. And they're going to have a terrific backfield punch to go to this somewhat new-look offense. Terrence Williams, an outstanding running back, over 1,000 yards last year, 5.7 yards per carry. And Jermichael Hasty averaged 5.2 yards per carry, 623 yards. There's another player that they're going to see. You won't see him this year is Jalen Hurd. You might remember him as a running back at the University of Tennessee. He was dominant there. He transferred to Baylor. Won't be able to play this year, but he's going to play in 2018, and they're working him out as a wide receiver. Keep that in mind. Now, the defense for Baylor, not very good last year, 96th in the nation, 30.4 points per game. They also lost their top defensive players, and new defensive coordinator Phil Snow is in. He likes to run a 4-3 base defense. Up front, you got Tyron Hunt and Iron Lewis, who are young guys, but they did see some starts last year. The defensive end, KJ Smith, is back. He's a senior with 7 sacks. And one of the players, Lenoy Jones Jr., mentioned in spring practice, he said physicality is the number one thing. So we saw a finesse Baylor team the last couple of years. Not so for this year. The new coaching staff is bringing in a punishing physical style. In fact, a lot of Baylor players got injured in the spring. It's going to be a different Baylor look on both sides of the ball. Now, the secondary lost 2 of their best players, but they got a sophomore cornerback in Graylin Arnold, who is a rising young star. And the special teams were very good and should be very good again. So overall, despite all these new changes, Baylor is capable of having a winning team and making a bowl game. Again, their 5 road games at Duke, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and TCU. Some winnable games in there. So I'll be looking at probably a 7 to 8 win range. If you want to circle revenge games for Baylor, it'll be the finale against TCU. They were a 7-point favorite against the Horned Frogs last year, and they got clocked 62-22. If you like to play totals, Baylor on a 38-26 run over the total, but most of that was under Art Briles and their wide-open attack. Might be a different look for this season. All right, let's take a look at the 2017 Kansas State Wildcats, the best college football coach in the country, and Bill Snyder. He's 77 years of age. He's been here 26 seasons, and he did it again, a 9-4 record when not a lot was expected. 6-3 in the Big 12. You got 8 starters back on offense, 6 on defense. How good is this guy? He not only wins, he covers Vegas numbers 37-21-1 against the spread. This offense should be very good. Again, they didn't pass the ball much, just 157 yards passing per game, but they scored 32.2 points per game, was 45th in the nation because the ground attack was devastating, 231.8 yards rushing per game. That was 22nd in the nation, and they should be very potent again because he got 4 starters back on the offensive line. He got senior quarterback Jesse Ertz back, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and he led the team with over 1,000 yards rushing, 5.5 yards per carry, and 12 touchdowns. Did have some off-season surgery on his throwing shoulder, but he looks fine coming into this season. They also have a redshirt freshman in Skylar Thompson. He's possibly in the mix. And the backfield is very deep for Kansas State. Alex Barnes is a sophomore, 442 yards, 7.9 yards per carry. Junior running back Justin Silmon is back, 5.4 yards per carry, 464 yards. And throw in sophomore Delvin Warmack, who had over 5 yards per carry. Kansas State is going to be a terrific running team once again. Even the passing game, while they didn't pass much, the wide receivers and the tight end group is actually very good. So if they want to go more balanced or open it up, they can this season with junior tight end Dayton Valentine and junior wide receivers Byron Pringle, who had 631 yards, and Dominique Heath had over 400 yards. And they got a sophomore wide receiver in Carlos Strickland. He's a transfer from Cal, where they threw the ball a lot, and he's had a pretty good spring. So he might be, and there might be a better Kansas State passing team, all of which would help the running game as well. The defense for the Wildcats was outstanding last year. That was really the backbone of how good this team was. 21.8 points per game, number 20th in the nation. The run defense was tough. Number 12, giving up just 112 yards rushing per game, and they'll be strong again with sophomore defensive end Reggie Walker. He was the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. Do have some new linebacking core. The secondary looks very strong, led by junior cornerback DJ Reed and safety Kendall Adams, who is a 3-year starter. This Kansas State team, if you like to play totals, are on a 15-8 run over the total, but it's hard to bet a team that likes to run the ball and plays great defense over the total. Probably a team that's going to win 9 to 10 games again because the schedule, well, they should be 3-0 when they open at home against Baylor. That was a 42-21 rout last year. And then their road games at Vanderbilt of the SEC, Texas, Kansas, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State. Last 2 years, the one team this team cannot match up against would be the Oklahoma Sooners, losing 55-0 and 38-17. But again, another 9 to 10 win season for Bill Snyder is likely. All right, let's take a look at the rebuilding Texas Longhorns. Things bottomed out again last year, 5-7 record, just 3-6 in the conference. Tom Herman, a hot commodity, coaching commodity, will be running the Longhorns this year. This guy's done a terrific job as a coordinator at Ohio State, and then last year at Houston. He's got a lot of talent and a lot of experience to work with, too. 9 starters back on offense and defense. And despite a losing record, Texas really wasn't that bad last year. And he looks to revitalize the program with a physical ground game. I mean, the most embarrassing loss that Texas had last year was to Kansas, 24-21 as a 23.5-point underdog. And you just look at the defense the last couple of years has really struggled despite talent. Last year, they had games where they gave up 31, 34, 37, 45, 49, and 50 points, which is almost as bad as the previous season. Well, the offense for Texas should be decent this year. They averaged 31.9 points per game last year as they tried to go up-tempo, and it improved. And they were very good with tremendous balance, 239 yards rushing, 252 passing per game. That ground attack was 17th in the nation. They got a couple of quarterbacks to take a look at. First, sophomore quarterback Shane Buechele is back, who was very good. 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, almost 3,000 yards. He's available, but one of Herman's first recruits was the freshman quarterback Casey Thompson, who he likes a lot. So you might see a battle, but they're certainly set at the quarterback position. They do lose running back Dante Freeman, who had over 2,000 yards, 6.3 yards per carry. But there's some good talent here with Chris Warren, who averaged 5.9 yards per carry. He's coming back from a knee injury. Kyle Porter is a sophomore running back who saw time last year. And this offensive line for the Longhorns is really loaded with big bodies and talent. It's an excellent run blocking line. Did struggle at times protecting the quarterback, but the new coaching staff probably should be able to help that. You got the left side of the line is very strong with Connor Williams and Patrick Va, with Zach Shackelford at center. All in all, pretty good balance team on offense because the wide receiver core is very talented and deep. Senior Amonte Foreman is back, 420 yards. That led the team. And they got Devon Duvernay. He's a sophomore, but he's got a lot of speed, 412 yards. He was second, so their top two receivers are back. And then throw in 6'6" sophomore Colin Johnson, only 315 yards, but a nice weapon with his height. So this team should be very balanced and potent for the new coaching staff. The Texas defense really struggled the last 2 years despite talent. Well, they had plenty of talent. They should have been a lot better. Last year, 90th in the nation, giving up 30.3 points per game. They do have talent up front again, but they let 190 yards rushing per game. But they got a new defensive coordinator in Todd Orlando, and he's preaching, like the head coach, a hard-hitting unit that is designed to cause chaos and turnovers. So you have to look for Texas this fall to blitz a lot more than they have to try and get after some of these Big 12 quarterbacks. Junior linebacker Malik Jefferson is here. He's been talented, a top recruit coming out of high school, but he's been inconsistent at times. Maybe he'll thrive under the new coaching staff. And then the nose tackle, Poona Ford, is a senior, and Jordan Elliott is back. And they pick up Gary Johnson. He was the #1 ranked JUCO linebacker prospect. So all in all, a lot of talent. The secondary is even better, loaded with talent and experience. Cornerback Chris Boyd is a junior, along with Devontae Davis. And free safety Brandon Jones, and Jason Hall is a senior strong safety. So this should be a much better defense with this new coaching staff. The schedule for the Longhorns in 2017 going to open with Maryland and San Jose. That'll be a nice 2-0 start. Then they have to head out on the road to USC, which will be the big early test in October. They got 3 consecutive pretty much home games, but they're big ones here against Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. 2 home and 1 neutral site games. And then they play 3 of their final 4 games on the road, including at Baylor. And then TCU was their biggest loss last year, 31-9. That'll be the big revenge game. So 8 to 9 wins is certainly possible with the talent that they have. Maybe even 10 if they can get the defense to live up to its potential. Well, let's take a look at the 2017 Texas Christian football team. Boy, what a fall they had last year. 11-2 2 years ago, and a 5-7 last year, 3-9 against the spread. Gary Patterson has some talent returning, 6 starters on offense, 7 on defense, but he's got a new look on offense because they bring in Sonny Cumbie, who's going to call the plays, and Sonny Dykes is a bored, pass-happy coach, so you may see more of a wide-open attack. The offense really wasn't that bad. 31 points per game, was 52nd in the nation. They have very good balance, 195 yards rushing, 268 passing, but this offense the last 3 years has ranked in yards number 3, 4, and then they dropped off to number 63 last year. That's why you see these coaching changes. They bring back senior quarterback Kenny Hill. Well, 17 touchdowns, 13 picks, over 3,000 yards. He was erratic at times. They'll probably have to start with him, but they have athletic freshman quarterback Sean Robinson, who had a very good spring. Wouldn't be surprised if Hill struggles again to see this freshman Robinson thrown in there for the new staff. They also have a weapon in Kyle Hicks. He's a running back, a senior running back, who had over 1,000 yards last year, 5.1 yards per carry, but he's also a terrific pass catcher, 417 yards receiving, 47 catches. He's a dual threat that they will utilize in addition to sophomore running back Darius Anderson, only 229 yards rushing, but 8.5 yards per carry. So there should be a balanced and potent offense because it's the most experienced offensive line in the Big 12. You got 6 seniors all total in the group, and they were great last year in quarterback protection, anchored by left tackle Joe Noteboom. He has 26 starts under his belt. It's just be a very good offense. The wide receiver core, well, they had a lot of drops last year. That's what the coaching staff has been working on in the off season, but there is talent. Senior Taj Williams returns 702 yards, 18 yards per catch. You got slot wide receiver junior Sean Nixon returning. He missed last year with a foot injury, but 2 years ago he had 501 yards receiving. And they got Cavante Turpin, who had 298 yards. Great speed, but he's had a knee injury. But overall, this looks like a balanced offense that should thrive under the new, more pass-happy attack with the coaching staff. The TCU defense last year finished 60th in the nation with 27.8 points per game. The defensive line loses its top playmakers. You got senior Matt Boson back and Chris Bradley. These two guys combined for 13.5 tackles for loss. But you do have the best linebacking duo in the Big 12 with junior Ty Summers and Trayvon Howard. Howard topped the Big 12 with 130 tackles last year, and even the backups for TCU are great. So this should be a great linebacking core. And the secondary looks just as solid. You got senior cornerback Ranthony Texada, junior cornerback Julius Lewis, and cornerback Jeff Gladney is a sophomore. And then the safeties in Nick Orr and Nick Small are very solid across the board. TCU plays a unique 4-2-5 defensive scheme, so secondary depth is the key, and they really have a lot of depth for 2017. The schedule, well, week 2 is the big one at Arkansas. This was a game a year ago where TCU was a 10-point favorite, lost 41-38. That's an early revenge game. And then the road games at Oklahoma State, at Kansas State, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma, and at Texas Tech. Probably looks like a good bounce-back team for TCU. There's really too much talent. They've been a dominant home team, 51-12 straight up, 35-21 against the spread. Although last year they were a disaster at home of 2-5 straight up, 1-6 ATS. But again, it looks like a bounce-back team. 7-8 wins is a likely, and another bowl for the Horned Frogs. All right, let's go to the Texas Tech Red Raiders. This team it's fun to watch with all their offensive passing and points scored. But boy, they can't stop anybody. Last year, that defense was a big problem. 5-7 record, just 3-6 in the Big 12. They did cover numbers with that offense, 8-4 against the spread. No surprise, they're on a 33-20 run over the total. If you go back to 2013, Cliff Kingsbury's team started 7-0, but since then, 17-26 straight up, 22-21 against the spread. The heat is kind of on Kingsbury for this season. He's got 5 starters back on offense, 5 on defense. What sums up this team is last year they lost 3 games when the offense scored 44 or more points. Well, the offense for this season should be good. They do lose Patrick Mahomes to the NFL. He had 41 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. This was a passing game that averaged 463 yards passing, easily number 1 in the nation by 100 yards over the number 2 team. And while they lose Mahomes to the NFL, the Red Raiders are really excited about this senior quarterback in Nick Shumanek. He is a 5th-year senior. He's been here 4 years, knows the playbook, and he saw time last year with 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, 464 yards. They've got an outstanding senior center in Tony Morales. However, outside of him, it's a very young offensive line. They're looking at true freshman Jack Anderson to step in at right tackle. The backfield has sophomore running back DeLeon Ward. Didn't do much to help bring balance to the offense, 4.2 yards per carry, but he is back. They did lose one of their top wide receivers in Tony Brown. He's actually transferring, not going to the NFL, but it's still a very deep unit, as it usually is for the Red Raiders. You got junior wide receiver Kike Kutu back, 890 yards. Dylan Cantrell is a 6'3" sophomore. He had 675 yards. You got Cameron Batson with over 600 yards receiving. So this team never really has a problem finding wide receivers, but can they find some guys who can play defense? Because that's still the major problem. 43.5 points per game allowed last year. Dead last in the nation, 128th. David Gibbs, the defensive coordinator, has a unit that finished last nationally, giving up 554 yards, total yards per game, 315 yards passing. It was a weak secondary, so you're going to see a lot of new looks for 2017 up front. They really don't have a lot of depth to stop the run and put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They do get Eli Howard back. He transferred from North Texas, had to sit out last year. He may help. And you got sophomore linebacker Jordan Brooks. He was very good as a freshman last year, but he doesn't have a lot of help around him. And then you got a secondary that was just awful last year, giving up 14 yards per completion. That was easily last in the conference. They only had 5 interceptions, and they lose 4 seniors. So it's a brand new look. A lot of changes, a lot of JC transfers coming in. Octavius Morgan, he's one of 3 JCs brought into the secondary. He's a cornerback. They got junior safety Jashawn Johnson. He has 23 starts, but overall there's a lot of new looks with the secondary. So this, once again, is going to be a team that scores a lot of points. They're going to give up a lot of points. And while we're at it, they're very weak in the special teams department as well. The Red Raiders were last in the conference in kickoff returns, last in punting, and ninth in kickoff coverage. The schedule for the Red Raiders, they're going to be home against Arizona State in week 2. That was a game a year ago where they scored 55 points and still lost 68 to 55. And they got some tough road games at Houston, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Texas, and even improving Kansas. They head out on the road. If you're looking for a revenge game, well, they lost at Iowa State last year, 66-10, completely embarrassing defeat. Overall, are we looking at, 4 to 5 wins for the Red Raiders? Making a bowl is going to be very difficult. And if you like to play totals, 33-20 run over the total for the Red Raiders. Wouldn't be surprised to see that continue as well. All right, let's move on to Iowa State for 2017. 3-9 last year, just 2-7 in the Big 12. However, it's actually quite a bit to be optimistic about for the Cyclones, because last year was the first under Coach Matt Campbell, who he was at Toledo and did a terrific job. And they finished the season strong, 2-1, as he implemented much of his new offense and defense. It was very impressive. Despite that, it's still a young team. It was young last year, and it's still relatively young. The offense for Iowa State averaged 27.7 points per game. The passing game was pretty good, 258.8 yards passing, and even the ground game was productive, 162.8 yards rushing per game. They use senior quarterback Joel Lanning a lot. However, he's going to be transferring to the defense. He's going to be a middle linebacker for this year. That's because they really like junior quarterback Jacob Park. He had 12 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, over 1,700 yards passing. It should be a balanced offense, too, because Mike Warren is back, a junior running back. He struggled with some injuries last year, 559 yards, but 2 years ago as a freshman, over 1,300 yards rushing, 5.9 yards per carry. And sophomore running back David Montgomery is back, 563 yards, over 5 yards per carry. The offensive line going to have some new looks. They got Julian Good-Jones, the center. However, he's the only starter back from last year. However, it's not all that bad because senior right tackle Jake Campos is back. He missed all of last year with a broken leg. That's a big boost. And they pick up a transfer in David Dawson. He's coming over from Michigan. Now, the wide receiver core for the Cyclones, definitely a strength for the team. You got senior wide receiver Alan Lazard back. He had over 1,000 yards receiving last year, and he's on a load. Trevor Ryan is here, along with Deshaunte Jones had 536 yards. And 6'6" tight end Chase Allen was a talented pickup. Had all kinds of problems staying healthy as a freshman, but he's in the lineup, so it could be a balanced offense. Again, should be pretty good and improving. The defense, always a concern with Iowa State because of depth and the inability to stop the run. That's really the focal point for this season. 31.3 points per game they allowed. That was 88th in the nation, but it was 218 yards rushing. That was 103rd. You got Joel Lanning, the former quarterback, is going to play middle linebacker in this 4-3 scheme. And they add a lot of junior college transfers. You got nose tackle Ray Lima, a sophomore, stepping in. J.D. Wagner is a defensive end who played well before a shoulder injury. And Jaquan Bailey was very impressive as a freshman defensive end. He is back. Secondary for Iowa State was very good last year and will be good again this year. All Big 12 defensive backs. Kamari Cotton-Moya, he's back, along with Brian Peavy. And the schedule for the Cyclones, a couple of early season in-state rivalry games to start the year, Northern Iowa, and they lost both last year, 25-20 to Northern Iowa. They got blown out by Iowa, 42-3. That was a series where they had done pretty well the last 5 years, but struggled last year, but that's always a big state rivalry game. And the Cyclones, unfortunately, they have 6 road games this year. At Akron is 1, but also Oklahoma, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Baylor, and Kansas State. The team they cannot match up well with is the Oklahoma Sooners. The last 4 years, they've lost 48-10, 59-14, 52-16, 34-24 last year, getting the cover. In fact, last year, they also lost to Oklahoma State just 38-31 as a 14-point dog. And that game against Oklahoma was close despite being a 21-point dog. So this team is on the way up under the coaching staff here in Matt Campbell. Maybe looking at 4 or 5 wins, but certainly an up-and-coming team in the Big 12. All right, the Kansas Jayhawks for 2017. All right, 2-10 record last year, just 1-8 in the Big 12. However, there's actually a lot to be excited about. Dave Beatty begins year 3 from Texas A&M. He came in with a reputation as being a terrific recruiter from Texas and the Kansas area, and he's been great at recruiting. This was a number 10th ranked recruiting class coming in for this season. That was actually ahead of Oklahoma. He brings in a new offensive coordinator, too, in Doug Meacham, who's a proponent of that air raid attack that he helped to run at several other schools, including TCU. And they could use it. They averaged just 20.3 points per game, 120th in the nation. They had a pretty good passing game, 240 yards per game, not much of a running game. Sophomore quarterback Carter Stanley returned 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He started the final 3 games last year, including the big upset win over Texas. And they also have junior college transfer Peyton Bender. He's a former Washington State recruit, and he is aboard, so they're pretty set in number 1 and 2 quarterback slots. They also got the top 2 wide receivers back, and Steve Sims, 859 yards, 7 touchdowns, and LeCavanton Gonzalez, 729 yards, 4 offensive line starters back, led by sophomore tackle Hakeem Adeniji, who is very good. And then you got the backfield is solid with running back Khalil Herbert. Junior Taylor Martin returns 324 yards last year, and they got Dominic Williams. He's a freshman, but a prize recruit out of the state of Texas, in addition to JUCO star Octavius Matthews. This guy was the number 1 junior college running back recruit in the nation, and he picked Kansas instead of Auburn and Louisville. So this coaching staff is bringing in some talent. They could use some help, though, on defense. 37.3 points per game was 113th in the nation. That was up, though, from a horrendous unit that gave up 561 total yards. They got a lot of talent and experience returning, particularly in the front 4. Defensive end Doris Armstrong is a rising young star to keep an eye on. And the Jayhawks' pass defense was actually pretty good last year. Now, they do lose 4 of 5 key players, but they got sophomore safety Mike Lee. He is outstanding. And a sophomore cornerback in Hassan Defense is a top junior college prospect who joins the team. So this is a team that's slowly getting better under the new coaching staff. And Kansas may actually start the season 3-0 with some of their early season games. And then after that possibly 3-0 start, they got home games against West Virginia and Texas Tech. Could they start 5-0 or 4-1? It's possible. And then Iowa State, some road games at TCU, Texas, Oklahoma State are going to be difficult, if not impossible. But still, with that early season schedule, are we talking about Kansas possibly making a bowl? Well, they're certainly going to be improved. And keep in mind that if you like to play totals, Kansas 27-19-1 run under the total. All right, I want to remind you, Jim Fice has that early bird special for NFL fans. The entire preseason, 4 weeks of NFL preseason, including his preseason game of the year for $29. Jim is on a 72-48 NFL run. Get on board before August. 888-777-4155. Make sure you look for more college and pro previews